Welcome everyone to week 3 of our virtual book club on Adam Gentleson's Kill Switch. My name's Wes and I am joining you all from Omaha, Nebraska. And if you haven't already, find that chat feature on Zoom. Let us know where you're joining us from. You can also rename yourself via the participant tab. If you click on the participant tab, then you should see your name on the right-hand side. Hover over it, click the 3 little dots, and you should see that option or the more option to rename yourself and include your preferred pronouns if you so choose. Just real quick, an introduction in case anyone's new to building bridges. Our mission is we are guided by the principles of servant leadership to mobilize and empower networks of relational grassroots organizers equipped to support campaigns and causes based in progressive values. And values are very important to us, not only progressive values, but our values and how we conduct ourselves as a grassroots organization. And so you will see a list of values there on the bottom. Those come from Pete Buttigieg's 2020 campaign's Rules of the Road, because we are an organization that was started out of inspiration from Pete's campaign. But we are committed to a broad and inclusive coalition of progressive Democrats. And so we're thankful that you have chosen to join us tonight. And ultimately, our vision is a just and equitable democracy safeguarded by an informed and engaged electorate where everyone feels as if they are valued and belongs. And so to help us do all these things, and everything that we do, including our book club, our trainings, and other activities we engage in, we have these 4 lenses that we like to look at as we discuss issues, promote candidates, and whatnot. And those lenses are bridging our rural and urban communities, creating a political culture of belonging for all individuals, seeking democratic reform, and engaging in the work towards racial equity. And so again, welcome. We're so glad you're here with us tonight. And we are also, I want to first introduce my fellow co-host who helped make this evening run smoothly. So Jana, if you would introduce yourself real quick, followed by Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jana Ciso, and I am here in Lincoln, Nebraska with Wes. Glad to be here.
Hey team, Jenny Okamoto from Carmel, Indiana, kind of central Indiana. Thanks for letting me join you tonight. I work on the book club and leadership development series that we run. So thanks for coming tonight.
Appreciate your help, Jenny and Jana. And tonight, we're going to have another special guest here for a Q&A. And so we are so excited that Stephen Spalding from Common Cause. Stephen serves as the Senior Counsel for Public Policy and Government Affairs, and is also the Senior Advisor to the President of Common Cause. And I'm going to pull out a few highlights, and then Stephen, we would love for you to expand on that and introduce yourself. But Stephen most recently served as the Senior Elections Counsel to the Committee on House Administration in the U.S. House of Representatives, which oversees our federal elections. As the senior aide to Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren, he advised her in the committee matters on all matters of election law, including campaign finance, election administration, election security, voting rights, contested elections, in the oversight of the Federal Election Commission and Election Assistance Commission. He played a key role in the House passage in 2019 of H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and hopefully you all are familiar. And if I am correct, I think the Senate's going to start discussion on this. We'll see if there's a filibuster. Stephen also previously served as special counsel to the former FEC chair and commissioner, Ann Rabel, at the Federal Election Commission. He advised her on enforcement actions, advisory opinions, policy decisions, as well as overall management of the agency and public engagement. I do note it that he served as a law clerk for the former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. He's held other various roles in Common Cause, and so we are just so excited that Stephen, who has a lot of articles out there that he has written, he's been on NPR, He's been on 60 Minutes, C-SPAN, many other networks sharing his wisdom and perspective. And so, Stephen, thank you so much. Expand on that if you want. I would really like you to include just a short bit on the work of Common Cause and who Common Cause is, as some folks may not. So again, welcome, Stephen. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks for the intro. I won't expound too much more on what I've done in my career thus far, but I'm really pleased to be here with all of you tonight. I've been reading the book as well. I have been swimming in the filibuster waters for nearly 10 years, and we can get into that a little bit later. But let me tell you a little bit about Common Cause, if you're not familiar. Common Cause is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that's dedicated to strengthening and bolstering American democracy. We were founded actually 51 years ago in 1970. We have 1.2 million members all throughout the country. And at our core, some of our core programs are really about reducing the undue influence of money in the political process, upholding ethical standards in government, ensuring that voting rights are expanded and upheld, and election administration is expanded and upheld. And those are some of the democracy issues that we've worked on for a long time. Common Cause, when it was founded, worked on a number of issues, whether it was related to the war in Vietnam, lowering the voting age to 18. That was one of our core issues. But what our founders at Common Cause found was that focusing on the processes of democracy is really important to ensuring that we have a representative democracy that represents us. So actually, we have a chapter out in, I noticed a couple folks are in Nebraska. I've seen people chiming in from Maryland. We've got a number of state offices. We work both in Washington, D.C. And in state capitals, really at the grassroots level, bolstering support for these solutions that make government more responsive to us and not just big wealthy donors. A democracy where everybody can participate, where everybody can vote, and where our elected leaders are accountable. So if you're interested at the federal level, we're very engaged in the fight for the For the People Act. As Wes mentioned, that's a bill that I worked on when I served as a congressional staffer, and now I'm helping build the outside campaign. We're really excited that tomorrow in the Senate Rules Committee, which oversees elections, it already passed the House, as Wes mentioned, in 2019. It also passed this Congress in March. Now it's in the Senate. It will be marked up tomorrow. That's when the committee really takes a close look at it. And it will be interesting. Both Senator McConnell and Schumer will be there, so tune in. But if you're interested at the state level too, lots of work happening at the state level on all of these issues. And so if you're interested in more, come to commoncause.org and sign up for our list. But just before we dive in, some of my work, when I first started at Common Cause as a law fellow, after I graduated from law school, one of the first assignments that I had was researching the history of the filibuster and Senate rules, because at the time, back in 2009, the first year of the Obama administration, Senator McConnell made very clear, even though he was, well, first of all, recall that there were like 60 votes, but then there were 59 votes when Senator Kennedy unfortunately passed away from brain cancer. And then we had Senator Nelson of Nebraska kind of looking for a number of deals. And so it was always trying to get to 60. And that's when Senator Reid was in the majority. When Leader McConnell took over, when the Republicans took over, they even when they weren't, let me back up, even when the Mr. McConnell and the Republicans were in the minority, they used this tactic of filibustering literally everything. And holding every single piece of Senate business to a 60 vote threshold. And so that really was new, as I'm sure, we've read in the book, and I'm sure folks are now well familiar with the discussion. That's not the way the Senate was ever set up to operate. And you can look at the chart of cloture motions, which are a rough approximation of measuring a filibuster, and they just exploded in 2009. And suddenly everything took 60 votes. And if you didn't get 60 votes, it died. So we can get into more of that, I'm sure, in the Q&A. But I did a lot of research and writing about it, was actually involved in a lawsuit against the United States Senate on behalf of Common Cause and 4 members of Congress and Dreamers who said, wait a minute, the DREAM Act passed the House. got 55 votes in the Senate and failed. The Disclose Act to shine a light on secret campaign money got passed the House, got 59 votes for cloture in the Senate and died, all because of this rule that the founders considered and rejected when they were drafting the Constitution and said, no, we're not going to require a supermajority to pass legislation because otherwise it would be used by the minority to overrule the majority, which is inconsistent and incompatible with many of our principles of democracy that we're seeking to expand and uphold. So that lawsuit, unfortunately, the court decided that the Senate could not be sued, but the members of Congress who I was privileged to represent, the Dreamers, along with our board member, who was the lead counsel on that, a board member at Common Cause, Emmett Bondurant, has done a lot of law review writing, a lot of research. There was a lot of hubbub of activity around that. And the movement to really reform the Senate to ensure that it can do its job has only grown since then.
Awesome. Well, you gotta throw more of this stuff in the. I love the fact that you researched the filibuster, and Jamel was the one. And welcome our other fellow co-host. Jamel is with us here tonight as well, and Jamel's the one who I believe found an article or heard you on a podcast somewhere, and so we're so glad that you have chosen to share with us tonight. And part of your biography included HR 1, and with the Senate beginning deliberation discussions on that, if you could see into the future, what do you think is going to happen with HR 1, the For the People Act?
Well, in my view, Congress has no choice but to deliver. As we see the Republican coordinated assault on the right to vote at the state level, whether it was Iowa. I mean, people haven't talked much about Iowa, but Iowa passed voter suppression. They were first out of the gates. Of course, Georgia, Florida, Texas, what's going on in Arizona. Congress has to respond, and Congress has the power to respond. Article 1, Section 4 says Congress sets, well, it says states run elections, but Congress may at any time alter those rules and regulations for how federal elections are run. So I think Americans have become really well familiar with, especially after the 2020 election, with a system that just does not seem fair. There are no national uniform rules when we elect one president of the United States. If you live in one state, you might have had your ballot automatically mailed to you, for example, in Colorado or Washington State or Utah or Hawaii or this year, Vermont. If you lived in another state, you would have to actually go out and request an absentee ballot. And the laws in those states say not only do you have to request it, you might even need to get a notary or a witness once you get that absentee ballot. And in another state, you don't. In one state, it would count if you dropped it off in a secure drop box or if you got it postmarked by election day. In some other states, you had to have it postmarked a day or two before election day. In some states, you had 2 weeks of early voting. In some states, you didn't have any early voting. That is not a fair way to run an election when you have no national standards and your zip code or what you look like really determines the rules of the road for your election. So that's the big piece of HR 1 that I think is getting a lot of attention. It's the national standards, which, by the way, really come out of John Lewis's Voter Empowerment Act. Even before the Supreme Court struck down the heart of the Voting Rights Act, Congressman Lewis was putting together a big omnibus package of reforms like early voting, automatic voter registration, paper ballots, expanded vote by mail. That's all part of HR 1. The second pillar of HR 1 includes reducing the undue influence of money in politics, shining a secret light on secret spending in elections, empowering everyday Americans to run for office and ensure that elected officials can run competitive campaigns without being beholden to big billionaire donors. And then the ethics pillar. Okay, so it's passed the House. We need to do our job to continue to build up the grassroots demand for this legislation. The last time a major piece of campaign finance reform legislation almost passed was the Disclose Act. And that was in, as I mentioned, after Citizens United in 2010. That bill passed the House. That bill would require outside groups that spend money in elections to disclose their top donors that give $10,000 or more. That made its way through the House. And as I mentioned before, it got 59 votes in the Senate and fell 1 vote short because of the filibuster. Prior to that, McCain-Feingold, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which closed the loophole on what was then called soft money, basically unlimited money to parties from any source. That made its way through the House, but it was a very complicated arrangement where they had to, getting really into the weeds now. But at the time, to get McCain-Feingold through in the House, because the speaker was opposed to it, they had to do something called a discharge petition, which is when the people that want that bill to pass to do an end run around the speaker go collect signatures of House members. And once you have enough House members, you get an automatic floor vote. Now, the Senate doesn't have that. The reason why I'm citing that as an example is it's going to take serious grassroots pressure from the outside, and it's going to take peer pressure inside to move this legislation forward. Leader Schumer has made clear on the For the People Act that failure is not an option and all options are on the table. I will also say that, of course, it's no secret what we've seen Senators Manchin and Sinema say about their concerns with the filibuster, but we've also heard Senator Manchin talk about the so-called talking filibuster and actually putting the burden on people to hold the floor and actually pay a price for their obstruction. We know now the way the filibuster works is it's just somebody sends an email or raises their hand and lets the congressional leadership know that they have a problem with the bill, and suddenly the threshold for passing a bill goes from 50 to 60. So I'll just say that, when I started working on filibuster reform, again, in 2009, 2010, 11, 12, and 13, when the Senate finally abolished the filibuster for most nominations, people did not think it was possible then. And we were starting with almost a dozen Senate Democrats totally opposed to lowering the threshold, the 60 vote threshold. And what happened was there was a drumbeat of pressure. The Republicans blocked the Secretary of Labor nominee, the nominees to the National Labor Relations Board, the EPA administrator, and then started blocking DC Circuit nominations. And the DC Circuit, one step below the Supreme Court, the second most important court in the country, according to a lot of people, because it hears all of these federal agency questions about how federal law works. And at the time, McConnell said there were 3 vacancies that President Obama was trying to fill in 2013 for the DC Circuit after all these other agencies were obstructed. And finally, it brought together a huge outside coalition of organizations who all saw their priorities being blocked. If you were somebody who was particularly engaged in the environmental community or on workers' rights or on reproductive freedom or a whole host of issues, the nominees you really cared about were being blocked. They had support. They had a majority of senators who supported their nominations, but because of the Senate filibuster rule, the minority trumps the majority and they were blocked. And so once you brought that huge group of people together who were saying if nothing's going to get through, because the way they were using the filibuster with nominations was you could essentially, if at the time Republicans lacked the votes to repeal a law like Dodd-Frank, or they lacked the votes to repeal environmental regulations, well, why not just deprive the agency of leadership, and you could essentially decapitate the agency and make the laws unenforceable because you're not going to have stable leadership there. So they figured that out. So personnel is policy. So eventually, I guess my point is, we didn't think we were going to get a rules change. Many people thought it was going to be pushing a boulder up a big mountain, but it finally happened. And in November of 2013, Leader Reid got the votes to essentially allow President Obama to govern and put his nominees in place. And I hope that we can continue to build the record with S1. All of these voter suppression laws can be overturned if S1 has a policy that would override them. And in many cases it does, because S1 is about expanding access to the franchise for every voter, irrespective of party. And there is one place that can stop these bills. Yes, there's lawsuits against these bills, but litigation takes time and resources. Congress has the power to step in. And what we have to make clear, in my view, is that blaming Mitch McConnell is not going to be an option, because the votes are, the people have the power to invoke the constitutional option. Some people call it the nuclear option, to reform the rules. And I don't think we have to get that hyperbolic about the language. The Constitution makes clear that the House and Senate get to choose their own internal rules and proceedings. And when those rules are being abused, as they have been with the Senate filibuster, I would submit, then we need to take action. But it's going to take grassroots pressure.
And we actually, we have provided, we've done Friday nights, every Friday, we do Letters for a Cause dance parties, and we have live musicians come in, and I know support for HR1S1 has been part of that. So we will provide links to sign up so you can join in that grassroots pressure. I wanted to, because one of our discussion questions, because here at Building Bridges, we believe the words we use as grassroots organizers and as progressives is very important. And I noticed you were saying nuclear option and then also said constitutional option. And I wanted to really point that out, because I love that, because you're right. The Constitution is wants the Senate to be a majority legislative body, but it is totally being controlled by the minority. And so I really wanted to point that out. And you were very advocating for filibuster reform, Senate reform, early on, probably before most of us were even thinking about it. And so now, we Senator Reid invoked the constitutional option to get nominations from President Obama out there and getting those agencies with leadership. And then we see with Trump and Senator McConnell, they expanded that to judicial nominees. So if you, hindsight, obviously, are you still, and I think I know the answer, but still advocating that yes, we need to totally get rid of the filibuster? Or are you open to Senator Manchin, who wants to bring it back to the talking filibuster? Or do you think it absolutely just has to gotta go?
Well, let me, a few things. First of all, I think it's important to just ground, and this came up in the book and you may have talked about it on other calls, but I do think we have to ground it in kind of the design of our system, where in the House, every person is supposed to be equally represented. I think gerrymandering skews that a bit. And in the Senate, each state is equally represented. And if you go back to the Constitution, again, when they were evaluating the Constitution and drafting it, we can tell from the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton specifically wrote that if you were to require supermajority requirements for passing most legislation, it would be wielded to, quote, embarrass the administration, destroy the energy of government, end quote, and, quote, subject decisions of Congress to the caprice, artifices of an insignificant, turbulent, or corrupt junta. So if you look at the situation, what happened is the way the rules, I'm glad that we're getting out of this box of the rules being inside the Beltway, inside baseball, because the rules really determine what makes it to the president's desk. But for so long, the way that McConnell has abused the filibuster, people aren't really paying attention to the cloture threshold and how many cloture petitions are filed and defeated or invoked. They just want to know if something's getting done. And when things aren't getting done, it's very easy for the minority party that is blocking everything to say, look, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Look at how ineffective the people that you voted for are. They're not delivering, and really using the rules to obfuscate the obstruction. So that's a problem. When it comes to this issue of, the shoe being on the other foot, the rules have, the way that the rules have been abused really called for a major change. It used to be that the filibuster happened once or twice a year, if that, for a really long time. I mean, go back to the original rules of the Senate. The original rules of the Senate were nearly identical to the rules of the House and provided something called the motion for the previous question, which is just fancy words for ending a debate on a majority vote. And then, as it's been told now, former Vice President Aaron Burr decided to clean up the rule book because he said senators are gentlemen and we don't need these votes and we can just all get along. And then eventually this loophole was discovered whereby senators could, theoretically talk for as long as they want. And then it was used primarily to block civil rights legislation, poll tax legislation, anti-lynching legislation. All of the hallmarks of Jim Crow and Jim Crow senators were using the filibuster to obstruct the majority. But we entered where it was originally and never originally, but in many times where it was the exception to the rule, it became the rule itself. And so when you were looking at this absolute blockade in 2013 of so many appointments, we elected President Obama to staff the administration. That means the Senate should have an up or down vote. That's the purpose of advice and consent. You can vote no on a nomination, but you shouldn't be able to block the rest of the Senate from considering that nomination. And so that's why I just believe that given the rampant abuse, we really need to move towards a democratic Senate, a Senate where democracy rules. And senators of both parties have been on both sides of the question, but one senator who was consistent all the time from Iowa, Senator Tom Harkin, said, look, I'm not afraid of democracy. At the end of the day, people elect us to represent their interests, and that means being able to actually vote. That's what I think about the filibuster. Yes, the filibuster, and by the way, it's kind of been a myth that the filibuster has saved a lot of things that progressives care about. If anything, it's really been used by, as President Obama himself said, it's been used as a Jim Crow relic when he said that at Congressman Lewis's funeral. So I really think we have to restore democracy to the Senate to actually have some semblance of a Senate that can be responsive. And I'll also just point out that it's interesting that, and I'm saying this, I work at a nonpartisan organization, but when you look at how the Republicans have used it, Mitch McConnell was able to move his tax cut legislation through on a majority vote. He was able to try to repeal the Affordable Care Act on a majority vote, all through reconciliation. We're now on the other side using reconciliation to move the American Rescue Plan, and now all the discussion is about how is reconciliation going to play into the jobs and infrastructure bill and the American Family Plan. So we're at a point where if the filibuster were actually used for debate and deliberation, maybe we'd be in a different place. But right now, the filibuster is used to shut down debate and to prevent any votes happening whatsoever. And so that's why we're in a fundamentally different place and why I do favor reforming the rules. Now, are there other, to a majority vote? Are there other steps to take to get there? Sure. Maybe that does involve, if you're going to filibuster, you have to actually hold the floor and pull out the cots and talk all night. On the other hand, you're going to find senators that might actually like that. There are some senators that would love to be on the floor all night. And think of those fundraising solicitations they're going to send out. Look at me standing athwart, 99 of my colleagues to, demand that we cut early voting or whatnot. So the incentives are going to be strange. But right now, those that support the filibuster say, well, it encourages bipartisanship. I don't see that right now, unfortunately. And so that's why I ultimately come down where I do.
Yeah. Well, and when you were talking, early to the early part or late part of the first decade, or, right after that, Senator Ben Nelson, my former senator, and Janice, I completely forgot him and how he was like, was it the Gang of Eight or something he was a part of to try to get them to work in a bipartisan way? So yeah, so when you said that brought back some old memories I kind of forgot about. So, well, we have a few people who have put in some questions, and the first one comes from Chris. And so, Chris, I believe Jana will get you unmuted, and go ahead and continue to put questions in the chat. I see that Jackie has raised her hand, so you can use that raise hand feature too, and we will try to go through as many questions as we can here in the next like 15 minutes or so. So Chris, let's get started with you.
Hi there. Hey, thank you for taking my question. So with the Biden administration doing such a good job now with the propaganda about what his administration is doing, and the lackluster ARA rollout when Obama came in to save us, do you think that the Biden and the Democrats will trust what the GOP says? And that, I mean, they've told us who they are. We know who they are and how they act. And are we gonna not give away anymore?
When you mentioned, go ahead.
No, I felt like I ended it unclearly, but maybe I'll just let you riff off that, I guess.
Yeah, here's what I think. I mean, I think that we know the playbook of Mitch McConnell, which was, I mean, recently he just said that 100% of his focus is on stopping this administration's agenda. So, it's not representing necessarily his constituents. It's not doing what he can to work with the administration where they can find compromise and unity. It is, I'm going to spend 100% of my time blocking.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we've seen that happen before. Like that's what the play was during the Obama years. And there was a lot of, some would say, time that was spent trying to seek compromise from some people who were not necessarily acting in good faith. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but I think given the crises, the crises of climate justice, of an economy in free fall, a racial reckoning going on right now, where we see the lack of equity that is baked into our systems and needs to be addressed. These crises, we elected our leaders to in part solve these crises or to take action, and not to have fights over the Senate rules. So I think that they need to move, swiftly. Now that said, they have been moving swiftly through this budget device called reconciliation. The only reason that I can think of that reconciliation is being used to move this legislation and move these priorities is because it's not subject to the filibuster. So again, it goes back to this new rule that it takes 60 votes to do anything. And actually, just one other thing I should point out, I was doing some other research. It was up until 1975, it actually took 2/3 of the Senate present and voting to invoke cloture, i.e. end a filibuster. We can say that's like 67 votes. And they thought that was a huge problem in 1975. And actually, Joe Biden, when he was a junior senator, voted to abolish the 67 vote filibuster in favor of a 60 vote filibuster. And so, he's on record lowering this sacred number 60 that many people assume is like in the Constitution, and it's not. It used to be 67, and he voted to change that. So just another quirk.
Well, and I think that's a good segue. Kathleen submitted a question about President Biden. So we'll allow her to ask the question, and you can kind of expand on kind of that road you were going down, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen. I shut off the video because hopefully you can hear me better this way.
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Yeah, recently President Biden said he didn't want to get rid of the filibuster. So could you address that? Do you think he wants to move on it, but not to abolish?
Well, he said a few interesting things. That's right. And I've heard White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki similarly say he's not for eliminating the filibuster, but he has sure sounded open to reforms, whether it is making people pay a price and hold the floor and actually filibuster. There's, I think, somewhat of a lot of people think of those quote unquote good old days. Of course, those days were not good. given what was being filibustered. Again, it's Jim Crow, its status as a Jim Crow relic shows that it was really preventing progress on a whole host of issues. But I do think that, President Obama, noticed the arc that he took, and of course, President Biden was part of that administration, but President Obama spoke clearly, I think, at Congressman Lewis's funeral and said, we've got to make do on voting rights. And if it takes getting rid of the Jim Crow relic like the filibuster, we have to act. And one thing is, this Congress, there really hasn't yet been a filibuster. So there has not been a bill that has been put on the floor that's gotten 50 votes, but has not gone to President Biden's desk. So I do think there's going to be a need for some senators and the American people to actually see the obstruction up close and be reacquainted with that. Those of us that are, eat, sleep, and breathe politics will remember those days of when everything was blocked, but some people don't. And so it may take actually seeing the obstruction to say, actually, we have to take some action. And at that point, seeing the grassroots and everyday Americans kind of say, wait a second, we have mass shootings nearly every week in this country. We have legislation that 90% of Americans agree to. It passed the House. Why on earth can't it get through the United States Senate when a majority of the Senate supports it? Because of a Senate rule? That's just not gonna fly. And so I think that President Biden's gonna face a lot of pressure on that front.
But that's because the minority is controlling.
Right. It is because the minority is controlling, but majority does have the power to amend the rules. And I should say, if you really want to go down a fun little rabbit hole, the reason why it goes through the constitutional option is because the Senate rules, Rule 22 is the cloture rule. That's the rule that says to end debate, so-called, you need 60 votes. But there's another rule that says the rules of the Senate apply from Senate to Senate because the Senate considers itself a continuing body. Only a third of the Senate is up every year. And Rule 5 says the rules apply from Senate to Senate and may only be amended as provided in the rules. Well, if the rules say you can only change the filibuster rule by ending a filibuster, and actually it takes 67 votes, you put senators in a straitjacket. The only senator that I'm aware of serving today in the United States Senate that ever voted for this current rule is Senator Leahy in 1975 when he voted with Biden to reduce it from 67 to 60. But right now, what happens is opponents of filibuster reform will say, wait, the rules say you can only change the rules as provided for in the rules. And as provided in the rules, you have to end a filibuster to a rules change. So you get stuck in this vicious cycle, which is why the parliamentary procedure known as the constitutional option is a way for the Senate to assert its rulemaking authority by a majority and finally amend the rule to get something done. And the Democrats have done it, and the Republicans have done it. And the last thing now is this legislative filibuster.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathleen, for your question. And we're going to get Jackie unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I think my question might relate to grassroots needing to speak up, but I'm not sure. I have an article here from February 4th, 2021 by Molly Ball from Time Magazine called The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election. And I was stunned to read it. I'm stunned to see that I can't find anywhere it's being discussed, and anyone I hand it to who's in politics is stunned to know that it happened. This guy, Podhorzer, apparently had formed a coalition with people like Gephardt and Wamp, former GOP congressman, the Chamber of Commerce, CEOs, labor, and they met by Zoom weekly before the election. It was secret meetings, and they worked like hell to prevent riots, to prevent all this eruption. It's a rather long article. I know Molly Ball is just an amazing writer. I wonder if you have heard about that. It's mind-blowing that such a coalition of people who can't stand each other did get together and make something good happen. And I don't see conversation about it anywhere, and it seems like it would be such an incredible thing. Is Liz Cheney trying to do something like this? I mean, first, I want to know if you've heard of that article. And second, I don't believe Cheney's acting alone. She can't be. She's calling her buddies every night. There's something going on there. So if you can shed any light on this
Yes, go ahead.
The Podhorser coalition that was formed.
So I did read that article. I was on Capitol Hill. I did read that article by Molly Ball. She's a terrific reporter. She has a great book. I'm currently reading a book by Susan Page on Speaker Pelosi, but she also wrote a book about Speaker Pelosi. But I do know that there was a very there was a real concerted effort by the nonprofit community, the voting rights organizations, people right, left, and center. I think throughout the Trump administration, you did see people come together to say that we are going down a very dangerous path under this administration. And so you had people of all parties or no party affiliation at all stepping out and speaking up. And so certainly, there was, I think, a lot of organizing around ensuring that election administrators had the resources they needed. I still don't think they did, but the resources they needed to plan effectively to administer the election. These are, in many places, you have town and county clerks who both do fishing licenses and business licenses and also run our elections. And at the same time, we know that at the time, there was a real significant threat from foreign adversaries, and we were really solving our and bolstering our election security on the backs of these election clerks. And so, getting the resources to the states and also ensuring that people got correct information when there was so much disinformation about the election process and about how elections are run, which is unfortunately continues to metastasize. We can't just kind of go on defense anymore. I think we have to go on offense about the correct information about how elections are actually run, the nuts and bolts of election administration. But I do think that there is certainly a robust movement of grassroots people and leaders in states who really saw democracy being on the line and naturally came together to find common cause with people who might not agree on necessarily every single policy, but do agree that the basic rules need to be fair, and have come together to really, they saw and foreshadowed kind of what we saw on January 6th, unfortunately, the violence that could have really broken out, not just on Capitol Hill, but in state houses and at polling places, God forbid, all throughout the country. And so we have to do our job to inoculate against that disinformation and go on offense.
So my focus, I'm sorry, I didn't actually finish my question, is based on the Senate. Can this kind of pressure be applied to the Senate structure, and how would we do that as a grassroots thing? And I'm thinking coalition. I'm in Arizona, so I suggested it to one of my Democratic groups in Tucson, and I can't get a response. But people are amazingly unfocused. They have their pet little thing they want to talk about, and I don't know what direction to go in here, really.
Yeah, I don't have I think getting involved with all those getting involved with organizations that are working on this issue in particular, and there are a number of groups, both nationally and I think in Arizona, that are working on talking to Senators Kelly and Sinema about this, but I think every opportunity you get, couple things, and some of this is back to basics for me, but I have to remind myself of it, having lived in Congress, having worked, not lived in Congress, sometimes it felt like that, but having worked as a congressional staffer there, members read their hometown papers. They read the letters to the editor if their name is mentioned. And if they don't read it in the actual newspaper, their staffer certainly flags it for them. And it's in their clips, and it's in their, when they see that, they know something's up. So don't underestimate the power of things like letters to the editor, of course, making phone calls, social media, tweets, whatnot. I heard an interview with Senator Kaine from Virginia a couple of months ago on NPR, and he said, none of my constituents have ever talked to me. They talk to me about, a fair wage, and they talk to me about, I can't remember what the issue was, but substantive issue of the day. They don't talk to me about Senate rules. That's a Senate thing, right? So if you are talking to members of Congress, and by talking to, I mean getting it out into the ether, organizing, going to town hall meetings, writing those letters to the editor, they know that this is something that people back home care about. Also getting what we call grass tops leaders, local business leaders, people involved in the community who might be involved in civic engagement, them too reaching out and building that network, and power mapping can be very helpful to move this issue along. It's not always, it's rarely, it's not the kind of elite opinion leaders who kind of advance the ball and set the terms of the debate. The inside maneuvering only gets you so far. It has to be massive outside mobilization to actually advance anything through Congress. And for something like the rules of the Senate, and we find this with campaign finance too. I mean, those are issues that members of Congress, they know about. They know about how to raise money to get elected. If they've won, they have figured out that system, most of them, pretty well. And when you're talking about senators, I mean, you're talking about the rules that governs their chamber and their debate. It can be a very special place. Everybody should go visit the Institute for the Senate in Boston. If you're ever in Boston at the Kennedy Library, there's this amazing institute on the Senate. But at the same time, the senators are there to represent us, and the rules need to be fair. And senators feel very personal about the rules, but you're seeing increasingly, especially throughout the presidential campaign and otherwise, the people have really, the people and senators have really woken up to the fact that the Senate filibuster itself seems to be one of the sole impediments to actually getting anything done.
Well, and I was thinking here as we're getting ready to wrap up, Senator Sass is one of my senators, and he loves to lecture America on the need to restore the Senate back to its true purpose of debating and discussing. And so I'm like wondering, I've never really contacted him before about this. And yeah, I agree. Like, let's debate, let's discuss, get rid of the filibuster so we can actually do it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that would be a tactic that would help, or at least get a Republican senator to maybe think about that. And so my question to you is, as grassroots organizers sitting here on this call, you and your work at Common Cause and everyone a part of it, do you think, and I agree with you that we kind of need a reminder of what this obstruction really looks like with President Biden at the helm now. But do you think that there could be support from the conservative Republican side to end the filibuster, or do you think it will go strictly party lines?
Well, it's really interesting because, Senator Cornyn, former Senator Hatch, have all written law review articles about the Senate filibuster and how it's undemocratic and how it shouldn't move. So there's certainly R's and D's on both sides. And, Senator Sass, I suspect, although I don't have the vote count in front of me, but very well may have voted to end the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations. I mean, that was something that, so Republicans did. So you could remind him of that. But they've been on both sides. I think ultimately people view this as a, it's unfortunately become this partisan issue, but there are members, and you might raise again, I bring up Senator Harkin. When he was in the minority and in the majority, he introduced a resolution to end the filibuster as we know it in a way that I thought was really interesting. It basically said the first vote would be 60, but then you would have a couple more days or a week of debate, and then it would be 57. And if you can't get 57, you'd have another week of debate, and then it would be 54. Then you'd have another week of debate, and then it would be 51. And ultimately, the majority could work its will. We need input from the minority, no question. That's our system. There should be robust debate, but as you said, Wes, we don't see any robust debate right now. There should be debate, but that's not what we see. So perhaps some sort of a compromise like that, where the majority could ultimately act, but where the minority would be able to use the spotlight, would be essential. One other kind of really technical nitnoid point I want to make, because maybe this would come up if you ever talk to him, because they routinely filibuster what's called the motion to proceed. So if a bill is going to come up on the floor, like S1, for example, there will generally be 2 bites at the filibuster apple if there's a lot of other ways this could go. But generally what has to happen is Leader Schumer has to proceed to put the bill on the floor, and that takes unanimous consent. And if you don't get unanimous consent and one senator wants to object and launch a filibuster, then take 60 votes to even open a debate. So once you get past the motion to proceed to debate, then you can debate the bill, and then they can filibuster it on the back end. But if senators want to say this is all about debate, as we know it's been used to thwart debate, perhaps you could start with abolishing the filibuster on the motion to proceed and say, all right, well, will you at least allow us to have a debate about the bill? Because that's filibusterable. And so that's another way to potentially get at it.
I love that, because I know Jamel and I have been discussing it, like, are we going to just get rid of the filibuster altogether? Who knows? But what are some ways we can slowly just chip and really get to the ultimate goal of a functioning Senate that reflects the majority of the American people? So my last question for you, Stephen, is, because we know when we're talking politics with people, whether they agree with us or not, you really got you need to have an elevator speech on why Democratic Senate reform, abolishing the filibuster, is so important. So if you could, as your ending point, give us that 1-minute speech on why we need to end the filibuster.
We elect people to go to Washington to solve our crises of the day, to represent us, and to ensure that we have a democracy and a government that is functional and that is ultimately responsive to the people. And the way the filibuster has been abused and is now wielded over all legislation, over all Senate action, means that it essentially nullifies election results and says that the minority has complete veto power over what gets to the president's desk. If the bill that we learn about in Schoolhouse Rock passes the House, passes the Senate, and goes to the president's desk. Unfortunately, the way the filibuster works, it passes the House, gets more votes in the Senate than gets a majority of votes, but now has to win by 10 to get to the president's desk. That is not the way democracy is supposed to work. We hear 3 arguments for the filibuster. 1, that it promotes debate. Don't see a lot of debate on the floor right now. If you were to turn on C-SPAN, you'd see a quorum call most of the time. So not many things are actually debated. Number 2, they say that filibuster promotes compromise and bipartisanship. The only thing that goes to the president's desk is something that's supported by Republicans and Democrats alike, but it actually does the exact opposite, because what the filibuster does is it gives the minority the path to regain power by making the majority fail and to block any and all votes. And block anything that looks bipartisan. And so there is an incentive to block everything to make the majority look bad. And finally, the filibuster is, we talk about how it is to protect the interest of the minority. And that is a place where the filibuster does work. It essentially gives the minority of the Senate, 41 senators who represent 23% of the American population, complete veto power. And so at some point, when you weigh the equities, you can have a government that does absolutely nothing and is not responsive to the voters who showed up in overwhelming numbers, especially in 2020, a record-breaking number, or you can have a Senate that does nothing at all. And so ultimately what I think we need is a functioning democracy, one that can again solve the problems of the day and is more responsive to all the challenges that we face in our life. And I think we're starting to see what that kind of a world could look like, as we saw through the rescue package that made its way through the House and the Senate and was debated. And hopefully we can do that on climate change, racial equity, police accountability, and ultimately the bills that I'm working on around voting rights and reducing the undue influence of money in politics.
Awesome.
A little bit more than a minute.
Hey, no, I think that was great. And, you know, Jana just privately messaged me and said, we need his elevator response in a shareable video right away.
All right.
And I totally agree with that. And so on behalf of everyone on this call tonight, thank you so much, Stephen, for sharing your perspective and wisdom with us. It was a delight, and I have a nice sheet of paper with a lot of notes, and I'm excited to contact my Senator Sass and you know, see what he has to say, because I think you gave me and all of us tips to how we can organize at our local level, interacting with our senators and members of Congress, but also writing letters, getting involved in phone banks, postcarding on this issue. So thank you so much, Stephen. We really appreciate it. And I really encourage everyone to check out the work that Stephen and many others are doing at Common Cause to save our democracy. So thank you so much, Stephen.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. And stay in touch, please. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Stephen.
See ya.
All right. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that conversation. And I do want to apologize. Life has, you know, with the kidney stone coming in, and then I had a wedding this last weekend that I officiated. And so I have not gotten videos up on YouTube. I promise you full discussions are going to get put up there. But I am going to get a highlight video of Stephen's done this week. So I'm saying that because you all can hold me accountable. So we are getting ready to go into our breakout rooms for our discussion. Jana has put in the chat that link. So if you would, you can click on that so you can follow along. And Jamel is going to create breakout rooms. I'm going to allow him to do that. But real quick, I just want to share my screen and just remind, I didn't do this at the start, but just our norms for our breakout discussion. We'll be in smaller rooms, you know, with about 8 or 9 people in each room, but just make sure that we allow all individuals to share. And you can share either verbally by unmuting your mic, or you can also just put things in the chat. But just make sure that we allow, use that responsibly so that a multitude of voices can be heard. If you do have your mic unmuted in the breakout room, please be aware that background noises can be picked up and hard for everyone to hear those who are speaking. One of the rooms will be recorded, and so feel free to turn your camera off if you so choose. And let's just adhere to the values of respect, belonging, and joy as we go about and discuss chapters 5 and 6 of Gentleton's work. So when we come back, reminder to the co-host, we'll need a representative from your group to share highlights as we wrap up. And so just so you know, if you're new to breakout rooms, once Jamel opens those breakout rooms, you'll get a little pop-up that either looks like that or it's in the bottom right-hand corner. You just click join and Zoom will transport you off into your breakout. So, Jamel, are we ready?
Yes, I'm hitting the button now.
All right. So hopefully you should be seeing that breakout room option pop up or in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can head on over.
Great. Well, hi everybody. And because it's a small group, we won't go around and do introductions or anything like that, but just feel free to participate. The very first thing is actually that something that came up as Wes was raising it with our speaker, Stephen Spalding. We use that, people use that term nuclear option. And, we heard another way of saying it, constitutional option. When you've heard the term nuclear option in the past, what have you thought, and what do you think about using that term?
Well, I think it's certainly something explosive, so to speak, because we are in a moment of time where we can't buy back our democracy. We have to work at reversing some of the changes and some of the attacks and insults to our Constitution. So I like the term. It may not appeal to all parties across the board, but for internal discussion, I think it's appropriate to shake it up. If we don't act, we're gonna lose our democracy that we have struggled to maintain, preserve. And we certainly are surrounded by enough autocratic leaders that we're in danger. I mean, China's ready to attack Australia, and Putin has just made all kinds of threats, and we don't have a functioning democracy. We're not going to be able to stand the pressures from the outside, and in addition to our pandemic.
Yeah, good points. Good points. Other thoughts? So Maria says it's definitely a term that shakes things up. Other thoughts?
Well, it's sort of interesting because I think the way it's normally used is to sort of scare it off. The idea that, by shaking it up, you're actually going to be, destroying democracy or something. So that it was interesting to hear Marie's that, that it was, preserving, because usually it's viewed sort of the other way. That's how it's used. And it was kind of interesting that our guest speaker, had commented on the terminology, because in some ways, I don't know who came up with it, originally, but it is one of those things that you have sort of the reverse, reactionary cry, because it is a constitutional, option, and that puts a different face on it. So I sort of like that, because in some ways it's a term sort of like, defund the police, or, partial birth abortion, it sort of scares, but Marie's option on, that maybe that's, that it is saving it is sort of an unusual, thing. But again, I sort of like the idea of the constitutional.
It's interesting, because when you think about, okay, terms are loaded and people are trying to come up with something that shows like shaking things up, but might not be as negative. Constitutional is nice because it's, it's of course constitutional, that's great, but it's not very shaking up, so play with it, see if you can come up with something that, like, if you were the ad people right now, what would you come up with? A word that sizzles and at the same time is positive.
Well, in view of sort of the popularity of Alexander Hamilton, maybe a rap song on, Alexander, he was one that.
I like that.
Yeah. Maybe we can get,
you like attach it to a figure, like the Hamilton option, or going Hamiltonian.
I always sort of liked the Hamilton, because he was always sort of the, the three branches of government, everything was sort of balanced out, but he was also interested in sort of the strong federal government as opposed to the states and stuff. So but that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
It-
when
I
you
think
come up with a, a little ditty for us, yeah.
mhm.
I think like the term constitutional option sounds like more official than nuclear option,
Mhm.
but I agree with Marcia. We need something like with sizzle.
Well, this will be something like homework to think about. You know, it's kind of fun, you know, to do things like that. Any other thoughts before I move on to the next question? I was gonna. Okay. Well. Oh, go ahead.
I think what gets me about the nuclear option thing is that, or we really, I mean, we are here, but it's like, how could we be at a place in our country where we even have to have a word like that to have democracy work?
Mhm.
You know, I mean, how are we, how did we, I don't recognize this country
Mhm.
that I'm living in and I've lived in for all of my life. I'm just shocked at what's been going on the last many years.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's something that's hard to grasp, you know,
Yeah.
especially with, you know, all of the ways that we've grown, you know, we grow up with Sesame Street telling us about cooperation and getting along and things like that. And yet we're now more polarized than ever before, you know, which is kind of like the next question. You know, they've come up with this notion of the party unity score to evaluate a candidate, you know, which is all about, well, you know, what percentage of times do you vote with your party as opposed to maybe splitting away from your party because you're thinking independently. Do any of you use that in your voting? And would you ever support somebody who might have a low party unity score because it might reflect independent thinking? What do you think?
For me, because I have the leadership I have in Indiana, I think like the party leadership and then also listening to your constituents, because I really struggle with that here in Indiana.
Mm-hmm. And in that, have you ever had a have you ever, like a same type of question, have you ever split your vote, you know, in an election, you know, same type of thing question?
Yeah, I have locally, but not nationally,
Mm-hmm.
like in our down ballot candidates.
Mm-hmm. How about others?
Can you just clarify the party unity score? Who
Yeah.
assigned it and where is it advertised? Because I have never seen it in my ballots.
Well,
and I've never heard of it when candidates present themselves for the first time.
Yeah, I think that it's something, because I hadn't really heard of it either, but I think that I've seen some of the more conservative, or, you know, some of the more on the Republican side, the more conservative ones will say votes, you know, 90%, 100% with the party, and if you haven't done that, then you're not scored. You're not scored as well. I mean, I think that there are a number of places where you can actually find it. Wes, you know, where do you see it? And I think some objective reporting is just, have they voted the party line or not? I've seen that in Ballotpedia.
Yeah, I definitely see it more from conservatives than I do from Democrats. But I just put the link in there. They now are called CQ, who does it. At least that was the one that Gentle sent. But I know, like, you know, pro-life organizations always put those out saying how awesome, you know, people are at being pro-life. And so I know advocacy groups do give scores, but this is one that is just solely focused on party affiliation. So yeah, so I just found that link, so haven't worked on it. But I know, I can relate to what Mimi said about being from a place that at the national federal level always goes against my personal beliefs. And I was actually talking with a friend on my way back from Minnesota this weekend, and there are some Republicans who run at the local level that if they were in my district to represent me, I could potentially vote for them. But right now, I think in 2020 and 2016 was the first time I ever voted solely Democrat before. And that's just simply because the other candidates were so in line with that obstruction viewpoint that it's all or nothing. And I never really ever saw, that desire to actually function and work. It was just solely. So so recently it's been all Democratic for me.
Well, I've always mostly, I think one time in my whole life, I voted for a Republican once. And it was because I knew him and I thought he was a good person. It was many, many years ago. But probably ever since then, and especially now that we're so polarized, I always vote just 100% Democrat. And now I'm from Georgia. So, we just finally got our 2 senators, took for freaking ever. But I know, I mean, I never dreamed that would happen. I really didn't. As hard as everybody was working, I thought Warnock would get in, but I didn't think Ossoff would get in, and he did. So thrilled about that. But I will say, I do have 3 really good Republican friends, and we did manage to stay friends, through this. But I will tell you that they voted for Biden, and then they did down ballot for, and I've heard of a lot of people that did that. Have y'all, has that been true in other states?
Yeah.
As well?
I think this this year for this election, I only voted for one Republican, and that was our common council, because I really disagree, our city council, and because I really disagreed with the Democratic candidate that was in my district. I personally disliked him, and I disliked his policies and the way he spoke to and about people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will just share. I actually look for somebody who does not vote party line. I just feel like, okay, to me, that's a positive if there's a mix. And that's just the way that I think it, to me, it just means that they're thinking independently, and I might not agree with them on everything, but I guess that's what I look for. One of the things that that comes out in the book, and it's in both chapters, is this fact that you've got on the Republican side these far right people, whether it's Jesse Helms or the Tea Party, where the mainstream is basically saying they're crazy, and yet everything that they have done, even when they lose, they have done it to help build their power base. And then that power base actually became something that the mainstream couldn't control. Is that, why do you suppose that that's happened in the Republican Party, we think, and not so much with the Democrats? Or has it happened with the Democrats?
Of late, I think it's more of a Republican thing. Group think seems to typify them, and it could backfire, and it did in Georgia. I worked on a campaign in Georgia, and there were a lot of people that did cross. They were Republicans voting for Biden, but at the end of the day, that they voted for Biden, but at the end of the day, they voted for the 2 Democratic senators, but then they crossed back to Republican for other down party candidates to quote unquote control the Democrats, and so they wouldn't be carry the reign out of control. They controlled them in that fashion, and that's kind of absurd to me. I'm an issues person and diversity oriented, and racial equity is the top of my platform, and so I think that the Democrats are the star performers. So I usually vote Democrat for that reason. I'm a physician, and there are a lot of human-oriented issues, including separation of families. I've actually worked with the caravanners that are not just Central Americans, they're displaced Mexicans because of gang violence. And, you know, the narco traffickers took over another town in Michoacan. And they come knock on the door. You have 5 minutes to vacate your house, or I'm going to blow you away. It's now our house for our drug movement, and they're gone in minutes. Mm-hmm. And this is just 2 hours from our border. Mm-hmm. 2 hours from our border.
I wonder. I mean, I can't answer why the Democrats, haven't had the problem, but I wonder from the Republican side whether, historically you look at, sort of the Republican leadership, and it was, businessmen, people that, had, gone to college, they were the, the leaders and stuff. And so that, maybe it was sort of overconfidence, the fact that, the Tea Party types that really didn't fit in, but were, we got their vote. So, that's a, good thing, and we'll be able to control them because, we're the successful businessmen, we're the, the well-educated, we're the Ivy League, we've been in control, they'll fade out, but we got their vote, so they'll get in. So maybe that's not such a bad thing. And maybe, it was sort of like, like, I guess, when you don't discipline your child or something, the child, comes unruly and takes, so, they maybe they had overconfidence. I don't know, because they were sort of the, the establishment, in many ways, and, maybe had more, whereas maybe the Democrats, because of the labor and various, we've been sort of a mixture and stuff there, we're, there isn't sort of one sort of traditional establishment. I don't know, that's just a theory, but.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of like, I personally liked there was so much discussion of Jesse Helms, which I went to school in North Carolina during his tenure, and I remember him, but really didn't understand, because I was from out of state, everything that was going on. But
yeah,
that whole
it was
notion,
interesting the way he, and I think you bring it up later as far as, there'd be sort of a silly vote that, everybody was against, but then he would use those to say, your person, voted against the thing and rally. And, it would stir people up. And, that's sort of, it seems sort of counterintuitive. And again, sort of like, oh, well, this is a silly thing, it didn't pass, but it, I guess not seeing the ramifications down there.
right, and I think that some of that message voting, I wonder if that increases if you reduce, like right now, things don't, they have so much tight control over what actually comes to a vote. Maybe they're trying to control the message voting that Jesse Helms did. I don't know. I mean, but. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, the one thing that the speaker also said that I thought was interesting was the fact that, by having deadlock, that sort of counts against us, because, when we did our phone calls, we would say, oh, there'd be people that were just sort of discouraged and, say, oh, well, nothing will happen. They were just so sort of down on it. Maybe that's, a problem. And the other interesting thing I was thinking when he was saying that if the bill's going to pass, you know, it looks like, you know, it's going to pass because you just need 50 votes. Well, maybe some of the, you know, Republicans or people that would otherwise be opposed to it, you know, they may have some little tweets to it that they're, you know, those tweets can, you know, I mean, then it could, you know, even get more. And, you know, maybe, you know, some of those adjustments wouldn't be so bad and it would look like it had wide, you know, better support. So we wouldn't be, look like we're ramming it down their throat. But maybe those little tweets and stuff, they, you know, they're not sort of rising to the level of getting heard because they're being drowned out by the little, you know, the noisy minority, you know. I don't know. But that was sort of an interesting thought that I hadn't really realized from the, because, you know, based on the speaker last year, you were thinking, well, you know, maybe, you know, there's some legislation you don't want, but if you're just not passing anything at all, that's also a negative. And so maybe, you know, being able to pass something is a good thing. Maybe the threat of being able to pass something may sort of, you know, make it look a little more bipartisan too.
Yeah, we need to get some senators in the book club so that they can explain them, so that they can explain themselves. So I'm too busy filibustering. You know, we have, I think we've got about 1 minute left, and so you remember the rule. You guys have to nominate your speaker, you know, to explain you know, some of the things that came up today. So who's it going to be from our group here?
Does Marie want to do it since she was our leader and spoke up first? And
I was gonna volunteer Maria as well. Maria, you don't have to share everything. You can just share like one big highlight too.
The big highlight is to filibuster the filibuster and unload it once and for all, because I think that representative democracy is in danger, and we need to preserve it at all costs. And whatever term you use, whether it's the nuclear option or the constitutional option, our defense of the Constitution takes priority at this moment in time. We can't afford to delay this, because pandemic is not going away today or tomorrow. We have other issues, and we have the real nuclear weapons facing us. We need to get it together. We need to have unity, and we need to have a strong country to face what's out there for us.
That's great.
Yeah, right.
You're willing to do it, right?
Oh yeah, sign me on.
Okay. Well, real quick, I just want
tell me what to do. Honestly, give me
just share what came up. You know, not everything, but just the general feel in the room, and you know, that's what you do.
Real quick, I'm gonna close breakout rooms, but before we go, I'd love to see, like, is everyone fully on board to abolish the filibuster? Like, yeah, but still a little concerned, or absolutely not. So I'm gonna hit close room. I see Rose gave her thumbs up reaction. You can all do it via camera or however, but we're gonna close the room and head back to the main room.
Thank you all.
And I'm a big thumbs up.
Me too.
I want to see everybody's thumbs up.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. I believe breakout rooms are officially closed and everyone has made it back. So I know it's 9 o'clock here. So those who are sharing highlights from the other rooms, please, 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 no more than 1 minute. Just for the sake of everyone's time here tonight. So room number 1, I gotta pop into and hear from, and I know Maria is going to share. So Maria, we're gonna get you unmuted.
I got it.
There we go. Share our highlight.
Okay. I believe that we were unanimous in eliminating the filibuster, and there was some discussion about the terminology of nuclear option versus democracy. I mean, a constitutional option, and I propose that the nuclear option. It's time for some nuclear options because we need to shake up the system, wake up the system, and preserve our democracy. Because we all want to be represented, we all want our voices heard, and we want our politicians to represent us, not their special interests or their individual interests. And this is the only way to do it. There are some people that do want to preserve the filibuster, but overall, I think that majority should rule in a democracy. And so whatever it takes, we're there for the process.
Thank you, Maria. And room 2, Jana, who's going to share with us?
We have Jackie sharing.
All right.
And got her. Oh, hold on one second, Jackie.
There we go. Okay, because I took neat notes. That's the qualification. Number 1 was language keeps us divided. Again, referring to nuclear option created by the press to get an emotional response instead of an educational effort at educating the public. The second thing was about how power shifts in the Senate from side to side anyway. So how dare Mitch tell us, well, you know, we really shouldn't destroy the filibuster. Anyway, you understand what that means. Okay, so we also talked a lot about party unity, and do we prefer party unity over independent thinking? And people seem to gravitate towards values, you know, and policy, valuing policy. So we talked about that for a while, and of course, Kristen Sinema's name came up again. Okay, and then voting across party lines. Have we ever done that? And I think the consensus might be that we used to do it when we felt safer, that there may not be a catastrophe happening. And then at the very end, of course, we had to mention that we might lose control at midterms. And so I can't wait till next week when we can figure out a grassroots solution to that. In the meantime, what a great speaker. What a fantastic comments and great speaker.
Thank you, Jackie. And Jenny in group 3.
So our speaker is Amy, and I just requested Amy to unmute. Amy, see if you got that.
And thank you all for being a minute or less. Nice work.
Okay. All right, I will cut to the chase. One core theme is the intricacy of the obstructionist apparatus really has to be made known to your rank and file voter, particularly Republican. And we talked about how the bases of both groups are so different, that the Democrats are pretty much motivated by a social justice agenda, whereas the GOP, at least the way we're seeing it, is more motivated by self-interest. And that underlying that obstructionist is some deeply rooted racism still that just has to be uncovered. At the very end, a really good reference, I do want to bring out Don Lemon's book, This is the Fire, right? I think group, This is the Fire, is highly recommended in terms of uncovering, you know, these latent issues of racism that seem to be part and parcel of that obstructionist agenda. I think that was one of the key things that we talked about. Did I do it justice?
Nope, that's great.
I liked it. Thank you, Amy. And I just appreciate you all for joining us. I'm going to share my screen because I do, I think Jackie kind of, alluded to what can we do as grassroots organizers, and Stephen also shared, how he really believes the only way for us to get this done and to have a functioning Senate and a functioning democracy is everyone in this call writing letters to the editor, calling their senators, having conversations with our friends, and organizing locally to build that excitement and need. And honestly, I don't want us to wait until we see more and more obstruction. Let's start the work now. And so, you know, with book club, oops, forgot to update this slide, but you obviously heard from Stephen tonight, but in 2 weeks, we get to hear from the author himself.
Yay!
So I believe Jenny is going to post some links in there. So if you haven't signed up for our next week, which is going to get really good because Adam starts talking about the now and what we can do now to solve this issue. And then we get to end with hearing from the individual himself. So please sign up for that. Building Bridges, we're a grassroots organization. I believe it's every first Tuesday or second Tuesday. It's the second Tuesday of the month. We'll be having an information session so you can get more involved in helping us run events like the book club, social media, or the leadership trainings. So hopefully you can join us to get more involved. We have many mobilizing opportunities. I really want to highlight Letters for a Cause dance party. Every 2 weeks, they pick an issue and they literally write letters, emails, or send tweets, however you want to do it, to get the attention of the senators that represent you and other members of Congress. We also write postcards at these events on Wednesdays and Sundays for progressive candidates across the nation. Shout out to Cammie Watkins. She's running for city council in my district. And so her election is tomorrow. So send positive vibes Cammie's way. We're also helping out Jalen McKee Rodriguez, who's in a special, he has to have a runoff election for city council. And then we're also supporting Marty Cunningham's. They are running for city council in New York. Jenny runs some phenomenal grassroots training sessions. Happening this week is unlocking your political power, because you all have stories, and your story is what's going to make impacts as you talk with members of your community. So stop on by so you can learn how to effectively share your political story. Then that's it. We're on social media. We would love for you to join us, amplify our posts, retweet our tweets, tag us on the Instagram if you're writing postcards or whatever it may be, or maybe it's a picture of you reading a book. Tag us to help promote the excitement of all the things that we do. So I'm going to allow all of you to unmute yourself, and I think you already can. So unmute yourself. Let's say our goodbyes, and we're going to see you all back next week. Bring a friend as well, so we can continue this phenomenal discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
See you soon.
Next time.
Have a good night, everyone.
Night, thank you.